Hey, Pitt fans, this is Adam Bittner, Assistant Sports Editor for Multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Just hopping in with a quick editor's note before the PG Pitt Show for Friday with Stephen Thompson and Abby Schnable. We had some audio syncing issues with Stephen Thompson for this episode, so you may notice that his words and his video feed aren't quite matching up, but we hope you'll stick around. Stephen and Abby had a great conversation about Pitt's big game on Saturday with NC State. So with that said, let's get right to it.
What is up, Pitt fans? Welcome to another edition of the PG Pitt Show, brought to you by FanDuel. I'm Stephen Thompson. That's Abby Schnable. We cover Pitt athletics for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And Abby, it kind of has the feeling of a big game this weekend at Acrisure Stadium. Pitt's played a couple teams in a row, kind of down on their luck, Syracuse and who else did they? Who was the game before that one? Boston College. No. Pitt has won 3 in a row against Boston College, Florida State, and Syracuse.
There we go.
three teams all kind of down on their luck to a certain extent. But this is an NC State team that, at least in Pat Narduzzi's mind, is the most talented team that Pitt will face all year. I don't know if that's true. I think, or they faced so far. I think Louisville would like to have a word about that. But either way, this is a team that, has some stuff going for it, still has a lot to play for. But Pitt gets to come home to a homecoming environment, play at home for the first time in a little bit, and try to keep this momentum going. Against a good team. I think the combination of where Pitt is at and where NC State is at kind of gives us the feel of a little bit of a bigger game. I think the atmosphere should be nice at Acrisure Stadium on Saturday.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, not only is it Pitt's first game home in 3 weeks, it's homecoming. That adds something. Pitt's coming off of what was a pretty rocky game, so they're going to look to bounce back. NC State's going to look to, beat Pitt, as Pitt is a little bit higher in the rankings than NC State right now, or the ACC rankings, I should say. And I think there's just a lot of questions surrounding Pitt with all of the injuries the Panthers are dealing with right now. I mean, Mason Heintschel got a little banged up. Rasheem Biles didn't play. Kyle Lewis went out in the game. The defensive ends have been banged up all season. And so I feel like, it's one of those games where you're like holding your breath a little bit, but not because like you think Pitt's going to lose, but just because of the fact that there's so many question marks right now due to injuries.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're facing, I think the defensive injuries definitely scare you the most, especially because you're going up against an NC State team where their strength really is the offense, and particularly, two guys in the backfield and CJ Bailey and Hollywood Smothers. Pitt right now, 6.5-point favorites, according to our friends at FanDuel. We'll see what that injury report tonight, that first injury report says tonight, and what it says for the rest of the week. But I think given where Pitt is at right now, if you're assuming that a lot of those guys aren't back, 6.5 points seems like a lot. But we're going to get into that as well. I think, though, outside of the injuries, which we're going to talk about in a minute, especially on the defensive side of the ball, I think the biggest thing walking out of the JMA Wireless Dome on Saturday night that was kind of on Pitt fans' minds was the play of Mason Heintschel. So like you said, a little bit banged up himself, maybe something with his right shoulder. We haven't heard anything official about what his status is for the game on Saturday yet. But Abby, he returned to that game. He played the entire game. Under 60% completion percentage. I believe he was at 54%, under 200 yards for the first time in his starting career. Didn't throw a touchdown pass for the first time in his Pitt starting career. So I guess my question is, what are some of these things that you can see Pitt doing better in this game to get Heintschel back on track a little bit?
Well, to start, I think he was a little bit due for a game like that, just because of how well he played against BC, and then he had those interceptions against Florida State, but he still did a really good job. So it totally makes sense that he had just an off game, and I think number one, the offensive line needs to just be a bit stronger in order to protect him better, give him a little bit more time, even though he handles the scrambles mostly well, but he did get to his own fault, got stuck in the pocket a couple of times, which wasn't ideal, which led to all of those sacks. And so I'd like to see the offensive line just really shore up so that he doesn't have that extra stress, because we've talked about this. The offensive line didn't look great last week. There were too many penalties. They were letting guys get to Mason quicker than we've seen. And I'm hoping being back at home, all of that kind of gets cleaned up. And then I also just based on what we know about Mason, I just have this gut feeling that he's going to come in kind of angry about how he played and try and prove that that's not who he is. It was a one-off situation. And so I honestly think a lot of it comes from within him, as well as, just kind of cleaning up that offensive line issues.
Yeah, I really do think it starts and ends with the offensive line, right? Like Coach Darvo, it can stay away, can cure themselves, is the exact words that he used, cure themselves of the penalties, especially on early downs. So if you're not false starting on first or second down, if you're not committing a holding that brings back a long run, then a lot of the other stuff is going to kind of fall into place, right? It's going to prevent, especially in this case, the two really good defensive ends that NC State has from pinning the ears back on obvious passing downs and really getting after the quarterback. It just, when you, part of being two-dimensional is putting yourself in good situations, right? And so, if Pitt is able to be a little bit more clean on first and second down and get themselves into some easier situations on third downs where maybe the entire playbook is open, fourth downs as well, that's going to really, really help out a lot. And I think, I totally agree with your second point about Mason just kind of needing to settle in a little bit. You're right. He was due for kind of a return to earth a little bit. So I think this is a game where, especially playing at home, he'll have a chance to be a little bit more settled. The crowd noise won't be as much of a factor. That's important for the offensive line as well. And it should be an opportunity for him to settle back in. I think accuracy on short throws, that's really the biggest thing, right? If you are just kind of able to move this offense piecemeal a little bit and, do the little things right, then everything else is going to fall into place. So for Heintschel, for the offensive line, it's just about doing the little stuff right. And I think everything else is really going to fall into place. Abby, let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball real quickly for Pitt. We mentioned some of those injuries at the top. We're waiting on that Thursday injury report coming up in, I guess, a little under 5 hours as we live and breathe right now. But, you mentioned some of those big names that left the Syracuse game or did not play at all. Do you feel confident that, the Pitt team that finished that Syracuse game is capable of winning this NC State game, or do you need more reinforcements from some of those guys who got hurt?
I personally would feel a lot more confident if at least one of Rasheem, Biles, or Kyle Lewis came in. NC State has a pretty decent run game, and Hollywood Smothers leads the nation in rushing yards, and it's not the ACC in rushing yards, and it's not by a small margin either. He has almost 200 yards over the next person behind him, and so that's a real threat. And I think Nick Lappy and Cameron Lindsay did a great job against Syracuse, but I just don't know how they hang against a runner like that. And so I would prefer, if I had to pick, give me Rasheem Biles, because I feel like he's been especially strong at stopping the run. But I'd be okay with Kyle Lewis too, because he's Kyle Lewis. Ideally, you want both, but in this situation, I would like one or the other. I'm less worried about the defensive ends, just because I feel like that's just been something that Pitt has been, dealing with all season. And so Isaiah Neal can play there, and I'll feel good about that. But I would like either Rasheem Biles or Kyle Lewis in, just because I just don't feel as confident in Nick Lappy and Cameron Lindsay. I think they probably could handle it. It would be a little ugly, and you'd have to have, help from the defensive line and the secondary quite a bit. And that's not something you necessarily want with, CJ Bailey's ability to throw the ball in certain scenarios. So I don't love it. I think they can do it, but I don't think it'll be even remotely pretty if we don't have one of the two guys in there.
I agree. I think it'd be ideal to have at least one of those outside linebackers in there, just because Smothers is also, a threat in the passing game as well. And Lewis and Biles are such good coverage linebackers that would be huge. But If you believe Pro Football Focus, Smothers gets a lot of his rushing yards going up the middle, right, in between the tackles. And so that really does, I think, bode well for Pitt defensively, because the strength really of the defense as a whole, I would say at this point in the year, has been the defensive tackles, right? Probably the strongest individual unit on the defense, maybe on the team, if you want to go that far. So I like that matchup for Pitt, and I think that if NC State is going to keep the ball on the ground, Nick Lappy and Cameron Lindsay, they're not Rasheem Biles or Kyle Lewis, but they don't miss a ton of tackles. That's one of the things they're really solid at. So I kind of like that matchup for Pitt, even without Biles or Lewis. Obviously you're better with them. You'd like Blaine Spires in there too, just for kind of rotation purposes. But I'm actually fairly confident in the Pitt defense's ability to keep a lid on things, even without those two superstar linebackers. If Smothers was a guy who was tearing teams up by jumping to the outside and really beating teams on the edge, that'd be one thing, but it doesn't seem like that's really his game. So I kind of like the spot that Pitt is in. And I do think that linebacker room is getting a little bit healthier, and that, there might be some better, that at least one of those guys has a decent enough chance to play, but we shall see. Abby, we've talked a lot about the Pitt side of this matchup, but I want to address the NC State side a little bit. Give me one thing that Pitt fans should be watching out. You've talked about Bailey, we've talked about Smothers, but let's dive in a little bit more about what makes NC State successful.
Look, this is a team that lives and dies in the run game, but not in the way that you think. It's in the scenario that when their run game is slowed down, they become way less threatening on all areas. They have averaged 190.5 rushing yards in their 4 wins, but only 93.7 in their 3 losses. And that's a huge difference. And so if Pitt is able to slow down the run game, which they have done really well this season, so I don't think that is something that is out of the question at all, especially with Smothers' tendency to run up the middle. I think that bodes well for them. And that's something that I'm going to be really keying on, because if Pitt can stop the run game, in theory, this should be fairly simple for them because of the fact that it really does take away their passing. And even if they are passing, I have really liked the improvements we've seen from the secondary, especially after last week. And so, I'm less concerned about CJ Bailey's arm as long as you kind of handle the run game.
Yeah, NC State is they play really well on early downs on offense. And then you can see that kind of sets up CJ Bailey for a lot of explosive passes. He does love to throw the deep ball, and he does it really effectively. But like you said, if you make them one-dimensional early in the game, it does allow you to drop some more guys in coverage and, play a little bit more on your terms, I think, and bottle up those deep passes. I think this game could get really hairy for Pitt if they do end up giving up 2 or more of those really deep, 20-plus yard passes. I said I like the matchup for them earlier in this video, and I still feel that way. Like, these defensive tackles against Hollywood Smothers and a good offensive line for NC State, that's going to kind of play a big part in seeing how far this game will go, especially because I'm not super impressed by the stuff I've seen from NC State's defense. Do not think this is a particularly great unit. And I think that Pitt, for a lot of reasons, will be able to kind of get back to what it does best. They give up nearly 400 yards of offense, per game, right? Like, that's not good. And they have not, they played Notre Dame, they played Duke, they played Virginia, but there aren't, they gave up 24 points to Wake Forest, who's not a great team. They gave up, more than 20 points to Virginia Tech, who's a really struggling offense as well. I'm just, not totally impressed with this NC State defense. I think Pitt will be able to move the ball, and as long as they can execute in the red zone, then Pitt's going to score north of 30 points. I've got a lot of confidence in Pitt on the offensive side.
Yeah, I mean, their defenses can be very physical, but they're very inconsistent, which leads to those huge yardage numbers that they're allowing. I mean, they'll make a huge stop on one drive and then give up a 60-yard play on the next, and that's an area that Pitt can really, take advantage, because Mason Heintschel has the ability to be very versatile, whether he's running the ball, whether he's handing it off, whether he's throwing it, and if you can continue to keep them on their toes, that's going to just continue the inconsistency that we've seen from the Wolfpack this season.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Abby, before we wrap up here, let's get into game picks like we always do. Like I said, via our friends at FanDuel, a 6.5 point spread favoring the Panthers. So, Abby, let's start with first. Do you think Pitt wins the game, and do you think they cover?
I think Pitt wins, and I like them to cover. It's their defense, even banged up, I like, and home field edge should really give them enough to win by that touchdown. I also think just Mason Heintschel is going to come out on an absolute tear, because what we've seen from him, he's pretty disappointed from last week, and he'll want to rebound after that.
I agree with you. I don't know if they cover, I don't know if it's a safe cover of that 6.5. I think you would have to sweat it out a little bit, but I do think Pitt covers. Like I said, I like a lot of the matchups, and I think Pitt playing at home does put them over the top. And then we'll go to the point spread or the point total, 54.5 points. Do you think that over hits in this game?
I keep going back and forth in this one because, like you said, this NC State defense isn't particularly great, but Pitt's offense is coming off of a bad day or a bad week. And even though I think Mason Heintschel is going to come out on a tear, I still am leaning the under. Both teams have shown that they can grind out drives, and I don't really see it becoming a high scoring shootout. I think it could be, but I just think that where NC State thrives is an area that Pitt is able to shut down really well. And so it would take a lot of points from Pitt to get to that over.
I want to agree with you, but I do think that this does get pointsy. I do think that the passing offenses are too good. And I think like the spread, this one's close, but 54.5, not that big of a number.
No.
I could see both teams getting into the 30s in this game. So I'm going to take the over. We'll see who comes out on top at the end of the game on Saturday afternoon. But until then, make sure you like this video, subscribe to us on YouTube, PG Pitt, and follow all of our written work at post-gazette.com. We thank you all for joining this video. We'll have plenty more from Acrisure Stadium on Saturday afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.